that was the main reason for getting in there. I mean, it's boring if you go too slowly up the antenna, because all it is a round stick. So I stopped at where. Yeah, but most of that time, that's not where the problems are. I'm looking for the joints. I did stop at some of the where the tower sections go together, and you can see some of those, and they're clean. We just cleaned up the tower about a year and a half ago. There's other towers that are dirtier than us. I don't know if I have any. Okay, well, we got quite a few people joining in. Welcome to everybody. We are kind of in a unique situation down here at the restaurant. If you look at there, it's not the normal viewpoint. Our normal room is locked, and there's a little bit of a challenge finding the key. So we're over in the corner of the restaurant. That's what you see. And there's only 3 of us here. So, so Dennis, anything on tech that you need to share?
Well, there's a little bit of antenna work going on. Hopefully we can keep it in the background and not affect the user public. But everything seems to be up and running right now. Had some minor problem with the auto patch on Chase, but nobody's complaining about it. So obviously nobody's using it or attempting to use it. And that's about where we're at.
We got the auto patch back up and running on Eldon this last weekend. So that's up and running.
And aren't we doing some antenna work over on the Mesa site this weekend? Or is that next weekend?
Next weekend, the weekend of of June 3rd.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that building has changed hands, and they've decided to, well, through whatever means, they have convinced all but 2 users to leave the rooftop. There's us and one other guy. And they decided they're going to dismantle the west side antenna structure. So we have to move our antennas over to the east side. And originally they talked about moving to the east side and then rebuilding the west side, then moving everybody to the west side and then tearing down the east side or remodeling under it or something. And they talked about that a year ago. And then those plans just kind of went into the limbo state. And now they came back and they're actually taking bids to totally demolish the west side antenna system or the west side mount system. So we have to get our antennas off of there.
Okay, and I won't even ask about public service because I don't think it's doing anything for a few months. So, anybody have anything else they need to share? Otherwise, I'll turn it over to James. Okay. Go ahead, James.
Okay, well, I guess given the situation we have with the restaurant tonight, I guess I'm kind of glad we don't have a formal presentation. there'd be no place for the presenter to sit and present, I guess. But in any event, if anybody happens to know of anyone that would has a topic that they would like to share with the rest of the group, that would be fantastic. Just get in contact with me. My email is listed on the ARA website under program chair, and feel free to drop me a line. And if it's not yourself, maybe you know somebody that would like to present or has a topic that they could present, and that would be great. Volunteer your friend. That's right. Volunteer 10 of your friends. And the topic doesn't necessarily have to be radio centric. It could be something to do with computers, could be something to do with an interesting site that you've gone to visit. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, I gave a presentation on the Hanford nuclear site up in Washington State. That was pretty interesting. Had nothing to do with radio. So if you have a topic, something like that, perhaps an interesting place that you've been, that you took lots of pictures and are willing to talk about what you saw there, that'd be great too. Thank you, Patrick. He says, my friend, me, has some great presentations. Well, I did take vacation this past week. I got back late last night. And so I do have a bunch of photos of Yosemite and some stuff on the Golden Gate Bridge. We went to the San Francisco area, and Yosemite Valley is not too far from there, about 150, 180 miles to the east. And so we did a jam-packed week-long tour of that area. So maybe I can set that up for the next meeting. Anybody else got a friend that they want to nominate? Yeah. Oh, yes. So, Bill, would you be willing to do a presentation on fusion, Mr. Kuchis? Now he can't find the unmute button.
That may be intentional.
Oh, thank you, Brian. That would be great. Any suggestions are more than welcome. I've been having trouble the last, I would say, year, maybe a little longer than a year, trying to get folks that would come and present to our group. So any help would be greatly appreciated.
You want an impromptu soapbox?
Sure, go ahead.
Oh,
Here, I'll mute and get out of the way.
Okay. I have seen antenna problems show up, both mine and other people's, many times over the years, and they're usually or often not recognized as antenna problems. And people don't understand why they can't hear anybody or why nobody can hear them. And what it comes down to is, to test an antenna, there are 3 measurements you have to make. The first one is, do you have a decent VSWR? That's a good indicator. The second one is If you take the antenna off, does the VSWR go to pot, or do you still have a good VSWR? And the third one is, how can you communicate with a distant station on low power? And if you fail any one of those three tests, you don't have a good antenna. There's something wrong with it. Now, I have a case. I've had a couple of cases. I had a magnet mount on a feed line years ago, and I was having trouble hearing and talking to anybody. And I took the antenna off the mag mount, and the VSWR did not change. I had a perfect VSWR with or without the antenna. I tried to unpot the mag mount base so I could re-terminate the antenna, but I was not having any luck at all getting into the epoxy to rip the thing apart. So I finally gave up and threw it in the trash and bought a new mag mount base, and the antenna worked great after that. Another one, and I still have this thing in my garage, I haven't figured out how to take apart the matching coil at the base, but it's a decent VSWR, but that antenna won't talk to anybody. And the only thing I can figure out is that it's gotten some moisture and dirt and maybe something else down inside that matching coil, and it's making a close to 50 ohm match, but the antenna is going into the short circuit. It's not going out the antenna. So I say, yeah, you measure the antenna, you check it out, you run a VSWR test on it. You still have to go back and try and talk to your buddy through a repeater, or talk simplex to your buddy who is far away, and see if it works. And I know years ago, and I'm not going to mention names, we had a couple of guys trying to help us out on one of the bike rides to Organ Pipe National Monument. And they said, yeah, we'll set you up a portable repeater on top of one of the tailing piles down by, shoot, what is that? Now the name escapes me. South of Gila Bend, down in the mining country. Ajo. Yeah, a tailing pile outside of Ajo. So they set this portable repeater up, and we're talking to them standing in a hotel parking lot in Gila Bend on handy talkies, and talking to them just fine on their mountaintop, and we can't get their repeater to work worth beans. Well, come to find out, they had a radio and two radios tied back to back, one for receive, one for transmit. And they had a separate antenna for each radio, and they were about 50 feet apart. They'd gone 25 feet in front of the vehicle for one and 25 feet behind the vehicle for the other. And the transmitter was just desensing the receiver. And they didn't understand why that was a problem. And we asked them, did you test this thing before you brought it out? Yeah, we tested it. We live 3 houses apart. And the guy turned on his 200 watt transmitter and cranked his beam around at my site, and it worked perfect. And I thought, 200 watts from 3 houses means nothing. At 200 watts and 3 houses away, you don't even need an antenna. Just the radiation from the internals on the radios will talk to each other just fine. What you got to do is get down in a half a watt or a quarter watt or 100 milliwatts and talk 10 miles and have good signal to noise ratio, good solid signals. Then your antenna's working. At 200 watts, you can't tell a thing, unless you're doing moon bounce or something esoteric like that. So you got to get a good VSWR. That's a good first test, but it's not the only test. You got to get the power down, way down, and make sure that you still radiate properly. And your buddy, if you're talking simplex, your buddy should do the same thing, so that you can make sure you're receiving properly. And if you're testing through a repeater, make sure you're far enough away from the repeater that its signal level is starting to drop off a little bit. So
yeah, that's a good point, Dennis, because a dummy load makes a fantastic VSWR all the way across every band. but you're
That's
not going
right.
to talk on it.
That's right. It don't radiate worth beans.
Yeah, it's got VSWR of 1 to 1, all the way from 100 kilohertz to 10 gigahertz. Just like any resistor. Yeah.
Yep.
So I saw Mr. Kuchis dropped off and got redialed back in. So can you hear me now?
I can, yeah.
Oh, good. So do you think that you'd be able to present on fusion sometime in the not too distant future?
Doubtful.
Doubtful.
I'm not really a speaker, James.
You talk a lot.
I do, but not to an audience. However, maybe we can get a presentation from John Kruk set up.
That would be fantastic. I know trying to get a hold of him is pretty tough sometimes. So
Oh, I think it's-
we
I
may
think
have
it's
to do it in the far
I think it's-
future.
Yeah, I don't think it's too bad. I'm working on the bucket truck, trying to hone out these holes here where these pucks go in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm honing out this hole here with my pick to clean out the threads so I can put the puck in there. So yeah, fun. These are the pucks here. There's the camera.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they got threads on them and Loctite on there, and it's what keeps the boom centered.
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm listening. I just want to get back to my work here before it gets too dark.
Right.
Okay, I
And I know
saw.
Mr.
I
Beatrice
will
has
try
been
to get a
working
jo-
on something.
I will try to get a hold of John Kruk though.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dennis, what'd you say?
I see that Patrick had a question. Is there a difference between VSWR and SWR? And I have to say, according to the last Smith chart that I printed out and did some investigations on it, if you have power measurements forward and reverse, you use one equation to calculate the standing wave ratio. If you have voltage measurements, then you use a different equation. And the difference between the equations is whether you convert the power back to voltage or not. So what shows up on the VSWR meter, it doesn't care if you call it VSWR or not. But the original theoretical derivation that I saw on VSWR used the voltage waveform on the coax to calculate the standing wave ratio.
Mhm.
So those of us that
Part
call
of
it
the
VSWR, it's just out of habit, sorry.
Yeah, it's the standing wave ratio meter, because it's a ratio, doesn't matter whether it's in terms of voltage or power. It does if you're doing some calculations, but on all the meters, it's just labeled as SWR because it's a ratio. So I recall Mr. Beatrice at some point was going to put together a slide deck. How far off into the future do you think that might be?
Yes, at some point in the future.
Some point. Less than 6 months.
Like I said, some point in the future.
Schedule him with a pencil so we can erase it.
Yeah, real world events seem to take my time up. So, those get dealt with.
Does anybody have any general questions about the ARA or the systems or anything in general?
I'll throw a question out there. So
Yeah.
I remember one time you guys used to talk about the repeaters and the problems and the maintenance and all that. When is it that you guys actually talk about the maintenance of the repeaters and their performance? Is it
Dennis,
on
you
this
want to
meeting?
take that?
Well, we usually talk about it after we fix them.
Okay. Because sometimes I'll hear chatter on the frequencies that there's a problem with the repeater, but you check in the website and there's no the status is green and good. So I didn't know if those were being addressed or if the status on the website changes just when someone's able to click a button on it.
Just
I
just
think
to kinda
our
let you people-
updates, I think our updates of the website are probably not as fast as they need to be. Usually, we have a lot of telemetry that goes on the repeater sites. So if you hear a message, a voice message coming over the repeater, then if you listen to that message, you can usually tell what's happening. For example, if it says on battery, that means there's no AC power from any source feeding it, and we're just running off the storage batteries. If it says auxiliary power fail, it means, yeah, that it was running on generators and the generator just quit. If it says AC power fail, then the commercial power went away, and the transfer switch may be in operation to start the generator so it can pick it up. And usually we put out a message, if it's on battery, please limit to short QSOs so that we will still have operational power if there's an emergency communication that needs to get through. So we don't run the batteries down too fast.
Right.
Other problems, we've got voltage monitors inside a lot of the radios. So you may get a low voltage on radio 6 or low voltage on radio 2 that will come over one of the sites with a lot of radios in it, which means that's an indication to us that something's gone flaky inside one of the radios. So its internal supply voltage is not under control anymore. And there have been cases, even over recent years, when we've discovered that on a given mountaintop site with lots of different customers and everything, we were the only ones that were monitoring the commercial power. So the commercial power would go down and we would call another operator on the mountaintop and they'd say, we didn't know that.
Yeah.
We'd call a power company and they'd say, we didn't know that.
Yeah.
So we were ahead of the game on monitoring the AC power. Other problems, if a repeater goes off the air, then we usually get a filing on it on a trouble report on the website, and that comes directly to me and a few other people. So we can check it out and see what's going on. And usually we'll make announcements about that for people that might be users of it, especially on the link systems. We'll let them know that such and such a repeater's off the air right now, and here's what we think is the problem, and here's what we think is the date we're going to go up and see if we can fix it. For example, if a repeater goes down on the rim link, that's spread over a large part of central and north Arizona, and things happen sometimes.
Yeah. No, yeah, I understand. It's volunteer too, so that is also another.
That's true. Yep.
Yeah.
And a lot of our guys are still working, so we can't just run off any day of the week and go fix something. We have to schedule their time.
Yeah, no, I know how that is.
Especially the tower climbers.
Hey,
So
Dennis, can I add something too?
yeah, go ahead.
You kind of skirted it real, so I'm going to hit it head on. So just because you hear somebody talking about an issue on the repeater, if you know there is a problem, please report it. There was a certain problem here recently that actually existed for 5 months before anybody filed a report and actually told us there was a problem. They talk about it among each other, and everybody assumed that somebody else reported and told the ARA. So if you hear a problem, please report it.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, one of the problems I was thinking of, I can't remember what the name of the tower is in Globe. But yeah, that one, a lot of people were just talking about that one was not performing well. But everybody seemed to know about it.
And that would be the one. They all knew about it, didn't tell the
That's the
people who run the
one.
repeaters.
That's the one. We currently have that running on a temporary borrowed antenna from another user. And we've got to get another trip back up there to fix our antenna correctly. We had a problem the last time we were up there.
Well,
So
and something else that, I mean, just in the last 4 or 5 years, we've gone through several of our sites and replaced the battery backup systems with brand new batteries and more advanced chargers. And I forget how much power we put in, but when we replaced, was it Pinnell? Was the last one? I forget, or was it Eldon? I don't remember now. Didn't we put enough battery backup in to last over a week, right?
Eldon, and it got tested right after we put it in.
Yeah, right.
We lost our AC circuit and we were down for 2 weeks from an AC perspective. And we ran on that brand new battery for almost 2 weeks and we barely got down below 12. We were doing just fine, just above 12. So
yeah,
Yeah, so there's lots of projects in the background that just over time that, you know, the team comes together and redoes things or updates things or.
So we probably should mention though that people that are interested in the technical side of this of ARA, the on the first Thursday of the month at 6:30 is the tech meeting, and everyone is welcome to participate and hear what's going on, and to volunteer to come up and help out where we can. So don't hesitate to join that meeting as well. It's a Zoom meeting, so it's easy to join. So,
And then maybe that's the one that I joined and didn't realize. So, all right. I appreciate
yeah,
that.
it's open. If you can't find information, you can email techchair@w7ara.net or president, and one of us will get you the information to get on the meeting.
Okay. Thanks.
Sorry, guys, I gotta leave. I got another net starting up. Very informative. Sorry about that.
Thanks for coming. Hope to see you next time. Hope he's gone.
that was quick. Okay, yeah, I have to say the change of the batteries was not entirely voluntary.
Right.
Somewhat
they
forced
made
upon us because the Forest Service got real antsy about flooded lead acid batteries.
Flooded cells.
If you get an acid
cells,
leak, flooded cells, you get an acid leak and you got a real mess on your hands. So they required a very sophisticated environmental capture thing with sandbags and acid-proof containers and all this stuff. And we said, no, we ain't going down that road. We're going to put a honking big gel cell in there, AGM batteries, and a proper charger that is designed to take care of them well. And then we don't have the flooded cell problem anymore. And they were happy with that. And we swapped out all the sites.
Yeah.
And that started somewhere between 5 and 10 years ago. And we swapped out the battery packs on all the sites.
Yeah.
Well, the 4-stars have gotten down to where if you had to have flooded cells on it, you had to have a 4-inch lip on a drain pan that can hold most of the liquid that's in your batteries. And then it had to have pillows around it that had the calcium carbonate in it so that it would neutralize anything that happened, because it could not leave your building. So they had the rules got to be really ridiculous. So it made it more beneficial just to replace them and go down to a thing. And what's nice about the batteries on Eldon, we used to have 2 strings of batteries that gave us a 450 amp hours, and now we're down to 1 string of batteries that gives us more power than that. And it just sits underneath a shelf. So we picked up floor space by doing it as well.
Yeah.
They're
Much more compact.
a lot more compact than old flooded cells.
Yep.
Well, I see it's a little after 8 o'clock. Does anybody else have questions or suggestions? Oh, Clark.
Yeah, I ran into something in some of my research that um, I was just hoping, I thought I'd ask to see if anybody knew anything about it. It's something called core transistor logic. It preceded resistor transistor logic, RTL. And the only thing I've ever been able to find about it is the name CTL, core transistor logic. I'm just wondering if anybody knows anything about it or has ever heard of it. The
Is
one
this-
reference that I have, to it says that it had a problem in that it could not do inversion. No. Okay, thank you.
What was this related to the old core stacks that they used to run?
Actually, I think it was back when they were. It preceded integrated circuits. It was done with discrete transistors and cores, magnetic cores. So it was at least vaguely related to core memory, which I have some. I actually have an example of, but I haven't been able to find anything about CTL other than the one reference that I saw that it was considered for one project and then dismissed because it could not do inversion and it was obsolete even back in the early 60s or late 50s, and that they at the time integrated circuits were just coming online and they had decided to do the project with ICs.
I guess we don't have anybody online that's 100 years old and remembers that. Let's see, 19, was it 1958 or 59 when Jack Kilby invented the integrated circuit along with independently Bob Noyce out at Intel doing the same thing? 58, 59. So let's see, if Kilby, I think, was in his mid 20s, wasn't he? '59. So let's see if Jack, let's give Jack the benefit of the doubt and say Jack was 30 years old in 1959. So that'd make him what today? 100 and something, right? Maybe we've lost that information unless we can dig it out of the library. Maybe that's worth a trip to ASU. It's interesting that, I find a lot of time, well, my work basically focuses on research and development. And a lot of times I find things that people tried like 30 years ago. And because technology hadn't advanced sufficiently, you couldn't make it work. But today you can actually make it work. And so, and then you can create something from that. So, those ideas, it may not have been practical at the time, but it might be practical today. Just like the field effect transistors, FETs. They were actually invented like 20 or 25 years before the bipolar junction transistor was invented by the guys at Bell Labs, except that they couldn't make the silicon or the germanium pure enough to actually see the field effect, to actually build a field effect transistor. So it was just too early. It is. Yeah, it's very, Clark was just saying the field effect transistor is very similar to the vacuum tube triode. And it is, it's a voltage controlled device, just like a vacuum tube. So.
Another bit of trivia that most people don't realize is that I think it was in the 60s, they actually developed a vacuum tube that would run on 12 volts, on 12 volt plate voltage of 12 volts. But by the time they actually managed to get the transistor, or get the vacuum tube down that small, everybody had gotten to transistors for car radios. So it was obsolete when it came around.
I had a 1960 automobile that had a tube radio in it that had those 12-volt tubes. And I always wondered how come if I ran it, if I was playing the radio while I was working on the car, so the battery was running down, all of a sudden the radio would just quit. Because one of the local oscillator wouldn't work if the voltage dropped
Wouldn't run no more.
just a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, James, another technology is MIMO, multiple input, multiple output antennas, which was actually developed in the 70s. But now, it wasn't until really 4G and now 5G cellular that we've really seen that taking off, because the processing power is caught up and we can actually do massive MIMO now.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the wonderful, the one that comes to my mind is Hedy Lamour inventing spread spectrum back during World War II, but partly because she was a woman at the time, they totally ignored it. And she was an actress, but she was an inventor in her spare time. And our cell phones would not work without spread spectrum.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it was, they proposed it, her and her co-inventor proposed it to the Navy, and the Navy just blew it off. And it wasn't until 20 years later, I think it was, or 15 years later, that that the military had actually implemented some of the stuff that she had come up with. And kept it secret, of course.
Mm-hmm. You want another soapbox?
Sure.
I have learned recently that people are occasionally having trouble getting two-way amateur radios to work on houses that have solar panels. Their receivers get wiped out with electrical noise. Turns out the guys building the controllers, the charge controllers and everything, and the voltage converters for the solar panels are using switch mode concepts. And in doing so, they aren't shielding anything, and they aren't suppressing the radiation of harmonics out on the wires going from box to box and hither to yon across the roof. And they're generating spurs all over the place. And you put an antenna on that same roof and you can't hear a thing because you're just wiped out with switching noise from the controllers on the solar panels. The solar panels themselves don't generate it, but the charge controllers and such do generate it. And there seems to be a lot of that going around.
That's Jeff Doherty. He said his W0NWA, we were talking, he's got a Wires X node at his house. And we were talking about maybe putting it on the Scottsdale machine until I got ours up. And he was actually going to put it up in analog. So we didn't have an analog anything. And he was saying that his Wires X anything radio wise is useless during the day. He can only do it at night when the sun goes down.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the noise.
And another thing I've noticed is the control systems they put on the modern diesel engines are noisy as all get out. If I'm traveling someplace, I can tell when there's a diesel truck coming up behind me because the noise floor on my radio just goes berserk. And as the guy pulls ahead of me, passes me and moves on, as soon as his cab gets ahead of me, my noise floor starts dropping way down again. So it's being blocked by the firewall in the truck, but the engine compartment is just radiating like mad. And it's an oxymoron because the diesel engine does not need electronics to run. So it's all the other control systems that they've built around it to control the exact mixtures and pollution controls and everything else. That's where the noise is coming from.
Here's a funny story. Are you done?
Yeah, go ahead.
Here's a funny story. So Steve, KB7 KWK, he'd come to my place, for work in the morning to pick up the truck, and he would park out in front of my house. And this has been going on for, probably 3-4 months. And the neighbor came to me and said, "You're a ham radio operator. You understand electronics and all the goofy things that happen." He says, maybe you can figure this one out. He says, you're not using your radios during the day, are you? I go, no, I hardly ever get a chance to use them at all. And he goes, okay, good. That knocks that one out. He says, but we've got this problem that my wife can't get into the car or start it during the day. And it comes to find out that it was Steve's truck. Something in there with the alarm, I think it was radiating constantly. It was transmitting constantly, or something. Maybe it was transmitting and receiving. It was for the electric start, the aftermarket electric starter that was in there.
Wow.
So he disconnected it, and he kind of noticed something like that after the neighbor said something, and we figured it out because he went to he had to go to a funeral home in Queen Creek. And he pulled up to the job site, and he was sitting in his truck for a few minutes, waiting to go in. I don't know why, but he was waiting to go in, and he noticed a lady. Oh, and this was only for Hyundai Santa Fe, or like the Santa Fe's or the Tucsons, only the Hyundais. And he noticed a Santa Fe pulled up next to him and parked. And the lady got out and she started walking. He could see her hit a remote and it wasn't locking. And you could tell she's getting frustrated. And she walked back to the car and manually locked the door. So, and then he says, "That's my truck." He says, "I'll be gone by the time you leave." But yeah, that was an interesting find to figure that out. But it was only on Hyundai Santa Fe's or Tucsons, nothing else. At least we didn't find anything else that it affected. Over.
Yeah. Years ago, when I was working at Motorola, the department I was in set up a little assembly area because most of our assembly was being offshore. And when they ran the numbers, they said, hey, this is a small operation. We can build it as cheap here as we can to ship it overseas and build it and ship it back. So we'll just build it here. and they hired a guy to manage the operation. And he was constantly looking for other products that could be built so he could better utilize the machine. And one of the conversations he had was with Ford Motor Company. And at the time, what year was this? This was back in the mid 80s someplace. They were looking for a way that they could hang a chip outboard of their main sealed computer box, so that in the engine compartment, so that they could, at the last minute in their assembly process, they could swap the chip to change the programming on the thing if they update the programming and all this. And their problem was that they were getting kickback from their fleet sales. The police departments and fire departments would not buy their vehicles because they radiated so much electrical noise that the two-way radios wouldn't work. So they were looking for a solution to that. Well, I didn't have anything to say that they wanted to hear, because my solution would have been, if you're going to do that, if you load the leads with ferrite, that'll suppress the radiation, but it's going to slow everything down, which means your best way to go is to have the active memory inside and the storage outside. And when you turn on the key, it loads the stored memory or the storage chip, it copies it into the inside chip and then shuts off the bus going to the outside chip, so there's no radiation outside. And they didn't want to hear about that. And I don't know what they ever did about it. We had a nice trip to Detroit to talk about it. But that's one of the problems, you know, the auto manufacturers, unless something like their fleet sales hits them in the back of the head, they don't care how much their vehicles radiate electrically. They really don't. They only care if the big buyers start complaining that their radios don't work in these vehicles. Then they'll start to do something about it.
So you're saying we have to buy stuff that the sheriff office buys, or that the local police department buys? Buy a Tahoe.
No,
So,
it
Uh,
seems
some-
like the manufacturers listen to their fleet sales division, and whatever decision they make, they apply it to the whole product line. So we all benefit from it.
I've sometimes wondered these sudden acceleration issues that come up every few years. I'm just wondering if maybe that's going the other way, that somebody's two-way radio is getting into the electronics for the car and making it suddenly accelerate. That they clearly, if things are radiating, they're shoddily, very shoddily shielded. And by the way, Dennis, I liked your idea about the loading from an external RAM. That's what Spy Bus is all about.
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of phase lock loop chip schemes that work that way. There's no permanent memory on the chip. It's all volatile memory. And therefore, when the power comes up, it downloads the setting for the phase lock loop from an external chip, and then it runs.
Not only from phase lock loops, a lot of the military gate arrays, programmable gate arrays, have volatile memory in them. And one of the things when the pilot says arm the missile, what's actually happening is it's loading the memory in the missile with the software. And when he pulls the trigger on it, the battery only lasts like 5 minutes, which it has a 2-minute flight time. And if the enemy manages to catch the airplane or catch the dud within 3 minutes, yeah, they can recover the software. But if he can't, which is very likely, there's no way to get the software back.
Yeah.
So I see Brian has put a notice in the chat about promoting, if the FCC is looking at, they did a notice of inquiry for promoting efficient use of spectrum through improved receiver interference immunity performance.
Yeah,
And I presume that has to do with 5G and airports.
Yeah, you could guess what started this. Yes.
This is where broadband over power lines is going to help.
Right. But the original broadband over power line was smart enough that if you were being interfered with and you transmitted, the power line broadband system would detect that and it would restructure the spectrum it was using to move away from it. So it would go away and leave you alone.
The original broadband over power line?
Yeah, if you go back 10 or 20 years when they first started playing with it.
Is this
when
like
they were operating from 2 to 80 megahertz?
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was Jack. That was Jack. They did it up in not Prescott. What's the other one over there? Cottonwood.
Yeah, a couple of hams had a big game with that.
Mm-hmm.
They look at the spectrum and find the hot spot, and then they go transmit on that frequency. And the whole system would reconfigure itself.
Yeah.
Cat and mouse.
Mm-hmm.
So, and just a quick update. It is fully operational up in a northern suburb or a northern town right now. So I guess they've got to now fine-tune some equipment and stuff. Some of the electronics, but it's operating up there now. I think they've gone five polls, I think, which just goes to show you that it does repeat and all that stuff. So.
Is that on the Indian reservation or off the Indian reservation?
Off.
Okay.
Yeah, off. Yeah, it's in a town up north. So. So we're getting closer.
Yep.
Well, I see the clock is showing 8:26. This would normally be where, if we had a regular presentation, they would be finishing up about this point. So is is there any other topics anyone wants to bring up before we close out? If not, thank you very much, everybody, for attending. And the three of us here in the restaurant, we managed. But hopefully next time they'll find the key and we'll actually be able to get into the room. It was kind of interesting projecting the screen around a curved wall. But it seemed to work. This new projector we got has lots of bells and whistles, and so between keystoning and whatnot, it's sort of square. Anyway, thanks again, everybody, for coming, and we'll look forward to seeing you next month.
Thanks, James.